In 2022, Jimmy Carr told a single joke on Netflix that triggered a petition signed by 20,000 people, a statement from the British Prime Minister, an official rebuke from the Auschwitz Memorial, and a real-time effort to get him pulled from the platform entirely. He warned the audience it was a career ender before he even told it. They laughed anyway, and what happened next made international news. Here are Jimmy Carr's most disrespectful moments. There's a difference between a roast joke and a moment where the entire room collectively realizes they're witnessing something that shouldn't have just happened. Jimmy Carr at the Comedy Central roast of Rob Lowe is the cleanest example of the second category that exists on tape. Pete Davidson was on the dais. Pete Davidson's dad was a New York City firefighter who died responding to the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001. Every comedian in that room knew it. Every comedian in that room had circled around it, made nervous gestures toward it, mostly avoided going near it directly. And then Carr, sitting there with that polite, weirdly reassuring British presenter smile, decided to walk right up to the line and then keep walking. What's wild about the setup isn't the punchline, it's the way he frames the whole thing. He pretends to be the most morally outraged man in the room. He acts genuinely appalled. He puts on this whole concerned, almost saintly tone, as if he's about to defend Pete's family from the cruelty of his fellow comedians, and then he uses that exact same tone to deliver the punchline.
Pete Davidson's here. I'm appalled that people would come here and make jokes about the sacrifice Pete's heroic father made on 9/11. This is not the roast of Pete Davidson's father. That was in 2001.
The audience doesn't laugh right away. There's a beat. It's the kind of beat that only happens when a room of professional comedians realizes one of their own has just done something they personally wouldn't have dared. It's the comedian equivalent of watching someone walk off a cliff and noticing on the way down that they actually planned this. Pete Davidson's reaction is the part most people remember. He doesn't yell, he doesn't storm off, he laughs, but it's the kind of laugh that's doing something else entirely. He just kind of stares at Carr with that specific Pete Davidson expression that says, I cannot believe what I just heard, but also I respect it, but also I am genuinely processing this in real time. And Rob Lowe, sitting at the center of the dais at his own roast, keeps saying wow on a quiet loop. Just wow. The kind of wow that means a man has just witnessed something he is not sure he was supposed to witness at his own roast.
Oh, that was dope. Wow.
Roasts are supposed to operate on a kind of social contract. Everyone agrees ahead of time that anything goes. The targets sign up knowing they're about to get hit. And yet, even within that contract, there are unwritten rules. There's a whole category of personal tragedy that other comedians, by mutual unspoken agreement, tend to leave alone. Carr doesn't believe in unwritten rules. Carr believes in the laugh. And if the laugh is sitting on the other side of a tragedy, Carr is going to walk straight through it in a velvet suit with that little smile that makes you wonder if he's completely fine or completely deranged. The clip has lived online for years. People still pull it up. They still send it to each other with messages like, you have to see this, and I can't believe he actually said it. There are entire YouTube videos that exist solely to debate whether or not it crossed the line, and the consensus tends to land in roughly the same place. Yes, it crossed the line, and yes, it was technically a really well-constructed joke. Both can be true. That's the Jimmy Carr business model in 2 sentences. You know how every comedian has that one heckler comeback they're going to be remembered for forever? The one that gets clipped, reposted, captioned, screenshotted into oblivion until it ends up on novelty t-shirts at airport gift shops? Carr's is so brutal it has its own folklore. Most comedians will workshop a comeback. Most comedians will polish it. Carr literally walks on stage with a paper fortune teller, the kind you made in primary school during silent reading, as a prop. He builds the bit, he sets up the gag. He works the audience into expecting something light and silly, and then a heckler interrupts him. The heckler picks the wrong night. The heckler picks the wrong comedian. The one comedian on the planet who has been waiting for an opportunity to deploy a comeback so vile it cannot legally be paraphrased on a family-friendly platform.
When's the comedy on? What's your name?
What you have to understand about this moment is the staging. He doesn't yell, he doesn't get aggressive, he just calmly turns to the audience, holds up the little paper fortune teller, asks the crowd to pick a number, opens up a flap with all the dramatic ceremony of a magician revealing a card, and then, with that same warm, polite, almost charming British inflection, reads what's written underneath.
Seems like the fairest way to deal with you, David. There are so many things I could say. Number between 1 and 8, David. 6. Okay, and you said to me, when's the comedy on? It says if you want my comeback, you'll have to...
The audience reaction is half laughter, half shock noise. You can hear at least one woman go, "Oh my God." You can hear several men do that involuntary "oh" that men do when something cruel and clever has just been said by another man. Comedy fans will tell you that comebacks generally fall into 2 categories. The kind that shut a heckler up, and the kind that leave the heckler with no legal option but to relocate. This belongs firmly in the second.
These things don't lie, David. These things don't lie. Nah, I'm kidding. She swallowed the...
What makes the moment work is the prop. He didn't write the comeback at the moment. He built the entire bit so that the comeback would feel like it was being delivered by a piece of folded paper from a stranger's nightmare childhood. It looks improvised. It is not. Carr has admitted in interviews over the years that a huge percentage of his ad-libs are actually carefully prepared lines waiting in his pocket for the right interruption. He is, by his own confession, a man who walks into a comedy club like a chess player walks into a tournament, 3 moves ahead and quietly hoping you'll make a wrong one. The heckler in question is reportedly named David. Nobody has heard from him since, probably for the best. The internet ran the line so hard it became a meme that outlived several political administrations. To this day, if you Google the phrase Jimmy Carr comeback, roughly the first 9 million results are about this exact moment. He has done thousands of stand-up shows. He has roasted heads of state. He once made a Holocaust joke that triggered an international news cycle, and the line about a heckler's mom's teeth still ranks as the single most replayed thing he has ever said. It's the Mona Lisa of disrespect. Hung permanently in the museum, the lighting is great. Now we get to the joke that triggered the introduction, the one that made the British Prime Minister issue a statement, the one that prompted the Auschwitz Memorial, yes, that Auschwitz Memorial, to publicly tweet at Jimmy Carr asking him to learn more about the genocide he had just used as a setup. The one that triggered a petition with 20,000 signatures demanding his Netflix special be removed. The setup is in a 2021 Netflix special called His Dark Material. Carr opens the routine by warning the audience directly that what he's about to say should end his career. He literally says the words. He tells them to strap in. He gives them the equivalent of a verbal seatbelt sign. And then he tells a joke about the Roma and Sinti victims of the Holocaust, a group of people the Nazis murdered in the hundreds of thousands, and which most people even today have never been formally taught about.
Nazi war machine. But they never mention the thousands of gypsies that were killed by the Nazis. No one ever wants to talk about that because no one ever wants to talk about the positives.
Now, here's where the controversy gets layered. Months after the special dropped, somebody clipped the joke down to 15 seconds, posted it to TikTok with no context, and detonated the internet. The clip got millions of views in 24 hours. Politicians weighed in. Charities issued statements. Members of the Romani community appeared on morning television demanding accountability. Romani activist Michael Marshall went on Good Morning Britain and laid out, calmly and clearly, the problem with the joke from his community's perspective, that integration is already brutally hard, that prejudice against Roma people is one of the most documented and least discussed forms of bigotry in modern Europe, and that a multi-million-dollar comedian using their genocide as a setup line was making the lives of real people materially worse.
Well, yeah, good morning, everybody. I mean, today, in today's society, it's so hard for gypsies, Romani gypsies, to integrate into society as it is, and this just sets us back immensely with this kind of humor.
The defense came from comedian Konstantin Kisin, who pointed out something genuinely uncomfortable for the moral panic, that Carr had told a joke about Jews in a previous special using nearly identical structure, and there had been no public outcry at all. The implication being that selective outrage is real, and that comedy that offends one group equally to another is the only consistent position, and that anything else is essentially a hierarchy of acceptable victims.
First thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say, only a few years ago, Jimmy Carr had another special in which the joke that he made about Jews, my people, was they say there's safety in numbers, tell that to 6 million Jews. There was no outrage. There was no attempt to cancel. And so if you want to have comedy in society, you're going to have to accept that everyone is going to get picked on every now and again. I'm afraid that is the way that it works.
Both arguments are real. Both arguments have weight. The debate kept going for months. The petition kept gaining signatures. Boris Johnson, then the Prime Minister, called the comments deeply disturbing. The Auschwitz Memorial wrote that it is sad to hear words that hurt people and pollute the memory of their tragedy. Critics pointed out that surveys showed over 50% of the British population already held negative views of Roma communities, meaning the joke wasn't introducing prejudice, it was reinforcing prejudice that was already statistically present. Carr, for his part, never apologized. Not really, not in the way the petition was demanding. He didn't pull the special from Netflix. He didn't issue a contrite press release. He didn't go on a redemption tour. He went on his next world tour and he sold it out, and he kept telling the joke. He has built an entire post-controversy career on the premise that he is the comedian who said the thing nobody else would say, and that the people who were most upset about it were also, in his framing, the people who had not watched the surrounding context. Whether you think that's brave or whether you think that's a calculated business decision dressed up as principle, both interpretations are defensible. What's not arguable is the fact that this single Netflix bit is, by every measurable metric, the most disrespectful and consequential joke he has ever told. Hands down. Some roast jokes target a celebrity's career, some target their appearance, some target their relationships, and some target the actual physical existence of the human being on the dais, in front of a live national audience, on Comedy Central, while everybody is dressed in cocktail attire pretending this is fine. Welcome to Jimmy Carr's segment on Ann Coulter at the roast of Rob Lowe, a 5-minute stretch of broadcast television that, in retrospect, may legally qualify as harassment. For context, Ann Coulter is a controversial conservative commentator who has spent decades deliberately positioning herself as a provocateur. She is, by her own design, exactly the kind of public figure who shows up to a roast prepared to be hit. The unspoken contract of the genre is that she would be ridiculed, she would absorb it, and the room would move on. What nobody at the dais was prepared for was the velocity at which Carr would attack. Picture this, a black tie event, a national TV broadcast, Ann Coulter sitting on a raised platform in front of a comedian she's never personally beefed with, and Jimmy Carr, with that signature half smirk, walks up to the podium and proceeds to publicly humiliate her in roughly the most direct way one human being can humiliate another in front of an audience.
Ann Coulter, here we go. Ann Coulter is one of the most repugnant, hateful, hatchet-faced bitches alive. But it's not too late to change, Ann. You could kill yourself.
That final line, the one suggesting suicide as a personal improvement plan, is the punchline he chose to land in front of millions of viewers on cable, with a smile. That's the joke he workshopped in the green room. That's the version he ran past his writers and decided was the strongest available finish. It does not stop there. The Coulter segment continues for another minute, layering increasingly graphic personal insults about her appearance, her sexual desirability, and her perceived irrelevance. Every single one calibrated to produce maximum cringe in the room and maximum shareability online.
Ann Coulter's seriously, this gets classy. Ann Coulter's is now so old and dry that it's just got a job drawing cartoons for the New Yorker.
It is, depending on your perspective, either the boldest celebrity roast of the modern era or a public flogging that crossed into actual cruelty. The room laughs, they laugh hard, but there's a particular kind of laughter you can hear in roast audiences when a comedian goes too far. It's high-pitched, slightly nervous, and there's a half-second delay before it kicks in because nobody is fully sure if they're allowed to enjoy what they just heard. That kind of laughter is all over this segment, and here's the kicker. Coulter, sitting on the dais, has to maintain composure. She has to smile. She has to take it. The format demands it. She cannot fire back in the same set. She cannot leave. And she cannot be seen reacting emotionally without violating the unspoken rule that roastees absorb everything thrown at them. So she sits there, frozen smile, glass of water in her hand, watching a comedian from another country tell her to commit suicide for sport. It is, by any reasonable definition, the most personally vicious extended roast segment Carr has ever performed. Not the most controversial, that title goes to the Holocaust bit. Not the most clipped, that goes to the Pete Davidson moment. But the most directly cruel to a single human being? Coulter, by a wide margin. Most comedians who appear as guests on talk shows enter the building in a friendly mood, ready to sell a tour, plug a special, smile at the host, and leave. Jimmy Carr enters the building like a man who has personally been wronged by every host on television and is prepared to seek vengeance starting in the green room. The Big Narsty Show, for the uninitiated, is a UK chat show where the host is, charitably, larger than life. Big Narsty is a grime artist. Mo Gilligan is his co-host. The show's whole vibe is loud, chaotic, fun, and friendly. Carr walks onto the set, sits down, and within 60 seconds, both hosts have decided to test him by roasting his appearance, specifically his clothing and his famously pronounced forehead. This was a strategic error.
It's like you're expecting flood. What's going on there? No one there. Someone starts shooting. No one there.
The thing you have to understand is that Carr lets it happen on purpose. He absorbs the entire roast. He smiles politely. He doesn't fire back.
Finish, cuz. And look at your forehead, cuz. Look like you got a heartbeat in your forehead.
That's not a 4 head, that's a 6 or an 8 head.
Your butt. You know you got a helmet on. Fuck them. We're just gonna start cussing, cuz. I'll just start shooting like school. No one there. Put my back's against the wall.
He just lets both hosts unload their best material on him while he sits there nodding patiently, like a man who has just been handed all the ammunition he was going to need for the next 10 minutes. Then he picks up the microphone.
What were you saying about going to the gym? What were you... Let's go rewind to that, my friend, because what's your favorite machine?
The forehead joke is one thing, the vending machine callback is another, but the moment that has lived online forever is what comes a minute later, when Carr stops doing surface-level burns and pivots into a punchline that Big Narsty audibly does not see coming.
Do they say, put the Haribo down? You're in danger. You might get type 3 diabetes. It's a new strain you're growing.
It is, in the most British possible way, a war crime delivered with a smile. Big Narsty's reaction is part of why the clip works. He goes from confident roast battle energy to genuine "did he just say that on television" eyes inside about 3 seconds. Mo Gilligan starts laughing in that desperate, helpless way you laugh when you know you've witnessed something terrible and you can't help yourself. The reason this moment matters in the context of this list is that it shows how Carr operates on hostile terrain. This is not his show. This is not his audience. This is two hosts in their territory, on their channel, with their crew who have just publicly attempted to roast him as the opening icebreaker. And he doesn't just survive, he turns the entire show into a documentary about how badly the hosts miscalculated. The forehead bit alone has its own micro-folklore now. The line about how many heads Big Narsty is actually packing is a line that exists permanently in the British roast canon. It's the kind of line where you can tell, just from the way it's constructed, that Carr probably wrote it the moment he saw the Big Narsty show booking confirmation. The hosts laugh because they realize, in real time, that they have been beaten by a man who came to the studio with a script and let them think they were improvising. To Big Narsty's enormous credit, he laughs along. He doesn't sulk, he doesn't get defensive, he takes the entire roast like a champion, which is genuinely the only correct response when you've decided to start a fight you cannot win. The clip ends with both hosts visibly crying with laughter. Carr is barely smiling, that's the difference. Carr is never the one laughing, he's the one making sure everyone else has to. This is one of the most genuinely fascinating in terms of how it landed publicly, because this joke technically has two targets, and the two targets technically are wildly different categories of people, and the joke technically refuses to choose. The setup is a stand-up routine where Carr is talking about Elon Musk. Specifically, Carr is referencing the 2025 controversy where Musk made a hand gesture during a public event that a lot of people thought looked extremely similar to a Nazi salute. The internet predictably split into two camps, the people who thought it was a Nazi salute and the people who thought Musk simply gesticulates strangely because of his autism diagnosis. Carr noticed both camps, considered them, and decided he was going to write a joke that targeted both simultaneously.
The inauguration was something, wasn't it? People are saying that Elon Musk gave a Nazi salute. So now the debate is Elon Musk a Nazi or is Elon Musk autistic? Can't he be both? There's a lot of crossover, isn't there?
It is a perfectly Carr-shaped joke in that it's mathematically constructed to upset the maximum number of people in the most groups simultaneously. People who are autism advocates were upset by the framing. People who are anti-fascism advocates were upset by the way it conflated neurodivergence with a political movement. People who are Elon Musk fans were upset that he was being called either of those things. People who hate Musk were upset that the joke arguably gave him a defense by suggesting his behavior could be excused by neurology. The math on this one is beautiful, in a Machiavellian sort of way. It takes a contested public moment, refuses to take a side, weaponizes both possible interpretations of the moment, and creates a joke that nobody could even begin to defend without first conceding several things they are not politically prepared to concede. The result is a punchline that is genuinely impossible to be a fan of without feeling at least a little bit complicit in something, which, as a Carr signature move, is essentially the brand.
We pointed out, being a genius comes with some baggage, right? Being a genius comes with a little Salt Bay pinch of fucking crazy. And he's got a bit of that going on. But I've met Elon, he's not a Nazi. And he
Jimmy has essentially weaponized the act of audience approval itself. You either laugh and feel bad about laughing, or you don't laugh and feel uptight about not laughing. There is no third option. That's the move. That has been the move for about 10 years now. It is, depending on your tolerance for being psychologically manipulated by a comedian wearing a velvet blazer, either the most refined art form in modern stand-up, or an extremely expensive trick. We're closing on the joke that, depending on who you ask, is either the most disrespectful thing Jimmy Carr has ever said, or the most disrespectful thing any comedian has said this decade. It's a single sentence delivered in passing during a stand-up set about Elon Musk, and it's so dark that even people who have defended every other Carr joke on this list tend to go quiet when this one comes up. The setup, mercifully, is short. Carr is mid-routine. He references South Africa's catastrophic crime statistics. The country has one of the highest violent crime rates in the world, including some of the highest documented rates of sexual violence on Earth. This is a real, well-documented public health crisis affecting millions of people. Carr decides he's going to make a joke about it, and the joke is going to be framed as romantic.
Know that, right? French is the language of love. Well, Afrikaans is the language of serious assault.
There is, in the audience, a noise that you do not hear at most stand-up shows. It's a kind of collective intake of breath followed by a half laugh that is doing about 40% of the work of normal laughter. The room is not committed to the joke. The room is reacting to the joke the way you react when somebody says something at a dinner party that nobody at the table is willing to defend. The laughter exists. It is real, but it is heavily compromised.
I actually speak a little bit of Afrikaans. Let's not turn this into a murder.
What makes the joke meaningfully different from the rest is its target structure. The South African joke targets, essentially, the lived experience of millions of women in a real country where this is not a hypothetical. It is a joke about something that is actively happening to real women in a real country, told for a punchline. This is the line where even Carr's most loyal fans tend to get quiet. They'll defend the Pete Davidson joke. They'll defend the tax avoidance jokes. They'll defend the Ann Coulter roast. But the South African punchline tends to get filed under jokes I would rather pretend didn't happen by people who have otherwise spent years arguing that Carr is a misunderstood genius operating at a level his critics can't comprehend. Even the geniuses occasionally hand in homework that's hard to grade. This joke is one that even the people who love him cannot bring themselves to repeat. Jimmy Carr has spent 30 years finding the line, crossing it, and selling out the tour anyway. Whether that's genius or something else entirely, you already know where you land.